knew you'd come back.
Characters fascinate me. For as long as I can remember, I have been drawn much more to characters than I have been to plot. Yes, a strong plot is important, but to me, the characters have always been the most important part of a story. You could give me the best plot in the world, but if its characters don't strike a chord with me, I'll probably drop it. And one of the most interesting things about a character is their morality. While there are amazing stories that show morality as black and white, more often than not, it is much more interesting when the line between good and evil is blurred. Gray morality sits in that beautiful murkiness, but the problem with it is that doing it well is quite a bit harder than a lot of people tend to think. So let's take a look at some series that have main characters with questionable morals. This is by no means a ranking of their actual quality, as that is purely subjective. I'll just be ordering them in a way that I think flows well. Also, this is your spoiler warning for Code Geass, Death Note, Go-Go Loser Ranger, and Oshinoko. First up is Death Note. I am definitely not calling it bad, but I really didn't vibe with it because I didn't think it really nailed what it was going for because of its main character, Yagami Light. I knew that it was supposed to be two things, that morality is complicated and that power corrupts. These are both fascinating points and I love stories about them. But here's my problem. Before he gets the Death Note, Light is shown to be a bored teenager who sees that the world is kinda screwed up. Seeing him learn about the Death Note and deciding who to use it on was pretty damn interesting. But then we jump immediately from him realizing it actually works and not being sure if he should use it, to him absolutely abusing it. It does seem kinda like it's gray morality at first because what he's doing is wrong, but he's doing it to bad people, so that makes it a little murky, right? Well, it would be if he didn't pretty much immediately say he's doing it because he's bored and that he wants to become the god of the new world. I don't know about you, but that's pretty sketch and not really that complicated.
This world is rotting, and those who are making it rot deserve to die.
Cool motive, still murder.
This is hammered home in the next episode when he is confronted by L, and he immediately takes the bait. This shows that he's just a petulant child with too much power throwing a temper tantrum, especially since we see how he writes Lindell Taylor in gigantic letters as he monologues. He freaking monologues. That's pretty evil. And then he doubles down on this when he starts killing investigators that are trying to catch him, removing the caveat of only bad people. Maybe if he struggled with it, he could still be considered morally gray, but since he pretty much dives headfirst into it, there's not a lot of gray there from where I'm standing. You can try to argue that Light wasn't always bad and was corrupted by the power, using the excuse that he becomes a stand-up guy who helps L when he loses his memories. But I think that's kind of flimsy.
One good deed is not enough to redeem a man of a lifetime of wickedness.
So it seems enough to condemn him.
If anything, it's more supporting black and white morality by having Light's personal morality basically being a switch to be flipped by the Death Note. There's a lot to say about this series, and I could probably go off on it for quite a while, but there are others I want to get to, and I should try to keep this a reasonable length. So jumping ahead a lot, Light basically dies as a maniacal madman who is caught doing terrible things. What started as a way to rid the world of bad people devolves solely into Light trying to become the god of his new world where his opinions on good and bad reigned supreme. The anime tries to make him seem remorseful, wondering what his life would be if he never found the Death Note, but when I watch that scene, all I see is...
If I had any single regret for the countless horrific events that have transpired in my wake, it's that I'm dying.
Now, I know that it's supposed to be a commentary on the justice system, and that part of it could be really interesting, but I still don't think it quite sticks that landing. I think it really tried, but if it dug too deep into that, it'd fly over the heads of its target shonen audience. And what we're left with is a character that isn't really that morally complex after the first 2 chapters, so that the readers know who the bad guy is supposed to be. Moving on to our next example, we have Lelouch v Britannia of Code Geass. I liked this story and character a lot more, so you'll have to forgive me a little here as I try not to compare them too much. I think what made Code Geass work more for me than Death Note is that Lelouch's evolution is more gradual. While he does immediately make use of his absolute command Geass the second he gets it, I think that works because of 3 reasons. Firstly, the first episode shows that he is more or less a good kid as he tries to help a crashed car, but also shows that he partakes in illegal gambling to cement that he's actually pretty morally questionable. Secondly, the people he uses it on are about to kill him to cover up what he stumbled upon. And lastly, in episode 5, when he meets C2 again, he tells her that all the Geass did was move up his plans. We get to see Lelouch take actions all along the moral spectrum in the first handful of episodes to support his gray morality. I've seen some people say that Lelouch is selfish and only cares about revenge and his sister, but I think that misses the complexities of his character. While I agree that revenge and Nunnally's happiness are at the forefront of his motivations, they aren't the only thing he cares about. If that were the case, he wouldn't have tried to save Suzaku and turn him to his side in episode 4. Not only did he want to surround himself with people he cares about, I think he wanted to save them from what he was going to do. To further support this, his actions have consequences. Shocking, I know, but what makes them work is how they affect him. He's willing to bloody his own hands by killing the people that get in his way, but when innocents get caught in the line of fire, it bothers him at first. He almost throws away everything he's been working toward when Shirley's dad dies because of his tactics. He has to grapple with the horrible things he's doing, and even though he comes to justify it to himself, it still weighs on him. Even though he thinks that what he's doing is the right thing, he still sees that what he's doing hurts people, and he has to live with that. Another part of what makes Lelouch work so well is how he handles the obstacles he encounters on his path of destruction, the most important and notable being Euphemia Lee Britannia. Now, before we dive in here, this plot point is a little contrived and could have been written a little better. Okay, a lot better, but overall it was set up ahead of time, so I can kind of forgive it a little for that. With that out of the way, Lelouch's grayness is highlighted and stands out all the more because there is black and white in the world of Code Geass. After most of the season showcases Lelouch's willingness to fall into darkness, we see that when he is faced with a different way, a better solution, he takes it. Of course, he doesn't relent right away as he concocts a plan to get the upper hand and continue his bloody march of revenge. But when Yuffie explains her ideals and why she's even trying, he can't help but see it as the better option. It's just unfortunate that his flair for the dramatic and need to explain how great he is leads to everything going to hell when his Geass goes out of control. Like I said, a little contrived, but his Geass never shutting off was set up, so almost forgivable? With his willingness to, more or less, stop what he's doing for the greater good, we see that no matter how far into the darkness he sinks, Lelouch still has other people's well-being at heart. This fact is cranked to 11 for the finale and his Zero Requiem. In the end, even after taking all the evil he can upon himself, making the entire world despise him, he did it for them. He gave them a target, something to tear down for a better world to be made, and made it easy to do so while also giving them a symbol of hope to rally behind. There's the old adage that villains see themselves as the heroes of their own stories, but most of the time they aren't actually trying to improve anything except their own lives. That's how Lelouch avoids being the villain. Almost everything he did was to make the world a better place, and it didn't matter how much evil he had to do to get there. The next character we'll be taking a look at is probably my favorite of this bunch. Like Light and Lelouch, Hoshino Aquamarine is a schemer, but unlike them, he is without supernatural powers, which is part of what makes him so interesting in my opinion. Now, Death Note and Code Geass work because of their grand scale, but Oshinoko is much more personal. The fate of the world isn't at stake. Instead, the focus is solely on what's important to Aqua, those he cares about, and what he's willing to do for them. Unfortunately, unlike Death Note and Code Geass, Oshinoko isn't quite finished yet as of this recording, so right now we don't quite know the depths to which Aqua will sink. But I think the first season gives us enough to go on. Most of what we've seen so far is set up for his arc. Pain is at the core of his character. How could there be anything else after watching the person you care about most die right in front of you? As Aqua puts the pieces together that the cause of Ai's death must be his father, he becomes twisted with a desire for revenge. This sets him up as basically Inigo Montoya.
Hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Since this is the overarching plot, we're not going to see that resolved anytime soon, so we'll have to take a closer look at everything else he does. After the time skip to their high school careers, we see that Ruby is taking a chance to become an idol like their mother. Naturally, since being an idol led to Ai's death, Aqua is completely opposed to it and takes steps to prevent it. He manipulates the situation around him to keep her away from the industry she deeply wants to become a part of. He may be trying to protect her, but his methods aren't exactly praiseworthy, especially since he is completely aware that he is crushing her dreams. With this being pretty much the first thing that we see him do post-time skip, we learn that there is just about nothing he won't do to achieve his goals. The one thing that keeps him from becoming more of a villainous presence is that unless he's trying to get information on Ai, every time we see him do something questionable, he's doing it for another person. When Akane falls into despair after the criticisms she received online become unbearable, it is Aqua that saves her. Not only does he pull her back from the ledge, literally saving her life, he is the one that organizes the retaliation. It doesn't matter to him how it could damage the reputation of the show they're on, or even his own reputation within the industry. Someone he has come to care about was hurt, and he will do whatever is within his power to get revenge for her. Sure, this might seem like he's just straight up doing the right thing, and he is doing the right thing in this instance, make no mistake about that. The problem is that what he's doing is very underhanded, and we can't forget that Aqua is perfectly willing to manipulate anyone and everyone, especially if he thinks they could become useful in his personal revenge plot, like he does with Akane once he realizes her psychological profile of Ai could be accurate. No matter how many good things he does or how good his motives are, we are constantly reminded that nothing is off the table for him and that ultimately he wants to kill another person. Aside from his sister and probably their adoptive mom, everyone is a stepping stone to his goal. Even Kana, who seems to be the closest thing to an actual friend, isn't safe from his manipulations, but the how and why are a little different. At first, we see him trick her to get her to join Ruby's new idol group, but after they work together on Sweet Today and he overhears the unkind words Kaburagi says about her behind her back, their interactions change. The next time he uses her, it's less of manipulation and more like an actual friendship, as he uses her as a sounding board for how he feels and what he should do. The problem is that she misinterprets this horribly, leading to her getting upset and hurt because he's not being honest with her. Then lastly, we see that he tricks her again by pretending to be Pieon to get her to talk to him so Bikomachi's show can go well. Deep down, we can see that he might be using his sister and the group as an excuse because he clearly cares about Kano when they talk on the balcony while he's disguised. All of this shows us that Aqua is a complex character. We can see that he's more or less a good person, but he's still twisted. Right now, it seems like he's doing things for the right reasons, or at least redeemable reasons, but there is the entirely real possibility that this path will lead to him hurting those he cares about.
Stop it. Get some help.
Lastly, we have Go-Go Loser Ranger. There seems to be a big misconception about this series, one that I really want to clear up. It is not, what if the Power Rangers were evil? It's much more nuanced and more thought out than that. Also way more interesting. As far as I've read in the manga, we've only really encountered a few truly evil characters, and those are the bosses like Peltrola. A lot of the Ranger Force are a little morally questionable, but I wouldn't necessarily call them evil. Environment plays a huge part in development, and these people grew up in a world where they were constantly shown that monsters are evil, many even having their lives torn apart by them. And since many of them have no idea that the remaining monsters aren't really a threat, they genuinely think they're helping to protect the world. Hell, the Dragon Keepers who do know the truth aren't even really evil. Okay, except Red. He's definitely evil. And the jury's still out for me on Yellow.
You can never read that guy.
But what is most important is that our main character, Fighter D, who takes pride in being a monster bent on world domination, isn't truly evil. His motives might be far from pure, and he does try to manipulate everyone around him, but his journey through the story is more or less a redemption arc as he gets to know humans and starts to learn the truth about what happened 13 years ago. What makes D's growth as a character and his changes in morality interesting is how those around him alter his perspectives. Before he infiltrates the Ranger Force, he is entirely willing to kill or hurt humans for his own gain. The closest he comes to any form of compassion is when he sees another fighter get killed. Hell, even during the exam, while everything is going sideways, he puts his own goal of killing Blue above anything else. Or at least that's what he tells himself. He says that he's doubling down on his plans and that he's really only on his own side if the bosses have betrayed them. But his dream and how he faces off with Peltrola tell a different story. He protects his fellow cadets and teams up with them against the seemingly unbeatable foe. This complicates his character, especially when looking at his dream for the future. He says he wants to dominate, but we see that deep down he's come to value the lives of his fellow cadets and wants them to reap the benefits with him. This shows us that the version of him at the start of the season and the one at the end are quite a bit different because of how he starts to see those around him, because he starts to care about them. Go-Go Loser Ranger is far from over, and D has a long and twisted path to follow. But with just what we've seen in the first season, I think it's safe to say that his complicated morality will shift from being more or less evil and selfish to aligning closer to Sakurama Hibiki. As much as I love most of these characters, I feel like they highlight a flaw in the concept of gray morality. I think for a lot of people, they associate gray morality with anti-heroes. So characters more or less like Lelouch, who does bad things for good reasons. But the reality is that anti-villains, people doing good things for bad reasons, like how Fighter D starts out, also fall into that spectrum. Where this starts to fall apart is that I think for most people, we don't actually want to see the bad guys win, or at least those we perceive as bad guys. This is why when characters turn evil, we usually get some sort of justification for why they switched sides or why they started murdering people en masse. And sadly, a lot of the times it just feels lazy. What makes gray characters so interesting is that we feel closer to them than purely good or purely evil characters. In reality, pretty much no one is all good or all bad, so it's much easier to relate to characters that are a little bit of both. We can see more of ourselves in some of them, and the ones we can't relate to, well, they tend to keep us on the edges of our seats. Give someone that's doing horrible things an attachment to another character that they just can't break, and then when that person's life is on the line, we get to see them falter for a moment. Show us a kid that's just trying to get by and then thrust an impossible burden upon him so even he isn't sure if he's good anymore. Make me watch as someone who has suffered the worst of humanity seek revenge against those who have wrought nothing but pain, only to have him target someone innocent. It's beautifully tragic and beyond fascinating, and really makes you wonder, what would you do if it was you instead?